Forgiveness for me was really hard. At a young age, I was sexually abused by my older brother, and all of my growing up years, my mom was a verbal abuser. I grew up being told I was ugly and worthless, she wished I'd never been born, and I had not really ever been taught anything about forgiveness and what that meant, but his word just clearly presented that forgiving those who had hurt us was essential to the health of our Christian life with God. And the main verse is Matthew 6, verse 14. If we will forgive others, God forgives us. But if we don't forgive others, then God doesn't forgive us. And as I studied that passage, I realized what it meant was when we were harboring bitterness and unforgiveness in our hearts, then God can't work in our lives until we settle those issues. It's kind of like, I use this illustration when I'm talking with the ladies in prison. It's kind of like Ron had a little electric train set. My husband used to love to play with trains, and he had set up this little train for he and Brian to play in the upstairs room. And so one night, the train wasn't working right, it wouldn't run. And the transformer was on, and everything was right on the train, and yet they'd turn on the transformer and the train wouldn't run. And so Ron remembered he had done some filing on one of the little connections on the train the night before, and he got out his little brush and brushed the track, and this little tiny piece of metal had been sitting on the track, which stopped the power from the transformer getting to the engine of the train. And that's exactly what unforgiveness does in our lives. It blocks the power of God from working in our lives. And so God had really done a transforming work in me. And I reached the point where I knew I needed to forgive my brother and I needed to forgive my mom. Even if they never knew that I had forgiven them, I still needed to do that. And even if they never asked me for forgiveness, I still needed to forgive. We live in a society where everything is instant. And so the moment I realized I needed to forgive, part of that thinking was, I'm not ready to do that. But I finally reached the point of understanding I could forgive even if my emotions weren't there, because God never asks us to do anything that He will not give us the power and the strength to do. So the process for me of forgiving was trusting God that He would get my heart where He needed it to be as long as I was obedient. So I turned it over to Him, took it back a couple of times, and turned it over. So we need to be patient with ourselves, and we need to let God do the cleansing in our hearts that needs to be done. And that was the point in time for me where my Christian life really began to become free. That burden that I had carried was gone, and I was walking in freedom.